Nazir Khan, popularly known as Naz, is a Pakistani-American college student and a basketball coach at the same institution. He belongs to a working-class immigrant family in Queens. Naz lives with his parents, Salim and Safar Khan, as well as his younger brother, Hassan Khan. Much like any other typical brown household, Safar works at a traditional clothing store, while Salim works as a cab driver in New York City. In the locker room of his basketball team, Naz is seen chatting with a player that he is mentoring. Then, another young man extends an invitation to him to a party at 55 Stanton Street in the city, promising that there will be lots of women there. Naz tells his family over dinner that he'll be going to a party downtown. He lies to his parents, telling them that it's simply a teen party, as he knows they would never let him attend a conventional house party. Hearing this, his mother expresses her concern about him going to such parties on that side of the neighborhood. As Naz waits for his friend Amir to show up, he learns that Amir will not be going to the party. Naz was supposed to have Amir as his ride, but that plan has fallen through. Now desperate to go to the party, Naz sneaks back into the house, grabs his father's cab keys, and heads off on his own. He approaches another cab to ask for directions, but nobody responds. He is puzzled and anxious to see so many people staring at him, forgetting that he is driving a cab. Before Naz could locate the switch for the off-duty light, two men jumped in. He orders the men to leave, but they refuse. This is observed by a passing police cruiser, who assists him in getting rid of them and gives him the directions to Stanton Street. Just then, Andrea, a stunning woman, enters the cab before he can leave. Naz attempts to persuade her to leave as well, but ultimately decides to give her a ride. When asked where he is supposed to be taking her, she just responds, "The beach." Naz, perplexed, asks her once again to be certain. He informs her that the best he can do is drive her to a river since they're in Manhattan. Andrea seems cold, enigmatic, and mysterious, mostly remaining quiet. But she breaks her spell soon, telling Naz that she is thirsty. So Naz pulls over at a gas station and buys a beer and water. Meanwhile, Andrea offends another driver by flicking a cigarette out the cab window while Naz is still inside, and the gas station security camera captures this. After a while, Naz stops along the river in the uptown area. They chat while sitting on a bridge before Andrea offers Naz a strange pill. He gently declines and watches Andrea swallow it with her beer. She tells him that she can't spend the night by herself, and before heading over to her place, Naz eventually swallows the pill she gave her. Then, Naz and Andrea are seen walking by two men on the sidewalk when they utter a racist remark. As a result, one of the two men stares at them intently as they head inside. Andrea makes tequila and lime drinks for the two of them. She then pulls out the kitchen knife and stabs the table between her fingers. Andrea insists that Naz do the same. Naz, however, is startled and puzzled and hesitates to follow suit. But after some convincing, he finally agrees to try it and finds it exhilarating. They both do it again, but this time they snort cocaine as well. And unsurprisingly, Naz cuts her hand with the knife by accident. But the two seem unfazed by this and begin making their way upstairs to the bedroom while kissing. Naz eventually wakes up in the kitchen, but doesn't recall how he got there. As soon as he realizes what is happening, he goes upstairs to get ready. He silently gets dressed in the room's faint light before telling Andrea that he is leaving. Oddly, she doesn't respond. Naz instantly turns on the lights and finds Andrea staring apathetically, as her life has already been drained by numerous stab wounds. In addition to this, he finds that the entire room is covered in blood splatters, which renders him even more speechless in horror. Naz makes a hasty attempt to leave and frantically races to his cab outside. He gets to the cab, only to realize that he has left his jacket and car keys back at Andrea's place. When he arrives, the door is locked, so he shatters the glass to open it. Naz scrapes his palm on the shattered glass while doing this, but he doesn't appear to care. Worse still, he attracts the attention of a neighbor across the street. Panicking, he also grabs the knife they were using for play as soon as he manages to find his keys. Then he immediately speeds off after removing a few red tickets from the windshield, nearly causing an accident. Next, Naz makes an illegal left turn as he is leaving. This is seen by a police patrol car, which stops him. Officer Wiggins notes that Naz's pupils were dilated and that he and the car both reeked of alcohol. She requests that he step out of the car and blow through a breathalyzer to verify this, but Officer Maldonado says they should let him go. Naz is ordered to put his hands on the car, and he accidentally leaves a bloody handprint. Meanwhile, Officer Maldonado responds to a call about a break-in as they are the unit closest to the alleged spot. Wiggins and Maldonado take Naz with them only to drive him back to the street he had just left. Later, they park in front of Andrea's home, much to Naz's dismay. The neighbor, who contacted the police, reports seeing a man hurry out of the house and into a cab. Naz anxiously watches them from the back seat as Sergeant Cortez arrives at the scene. Cortez enters the house along with Wiggins and Maldonado, but seconds later Maldonado comes out gagging. and the sergeant orders full backup and an additional unit. In no time, the crime scene unit arrives on the scene. The night guard then makes a call to the homicide detective sergeant, Dennis Box. When Box gets to the scene, an officer gives him an update on what happened. Naz is then seen sitting in the patrol car's back seat. He gives the officers the order to take the poor fellow to the station and let him go. They obediently comply. The detectives and other units investigate the crime scene in the meantime. While they take pictures for evidence, Andrea's lifeless corpse stares vacantly into the camera. Naz, on the other hand, is brought to the station and instructed to simply sit. He complies, then proceeds to sit and observe. He only stares at his phone, too terrified to call anyone to save him. In addition, he abruptly realizes he still has the knife in his jacket. At about the same time, Box receives input from the CSU unit that the murder weapon was a sizable knife. Next, the guy who had earlier thrown Naz racial remarks walks down the same street. Later known as Trevor, he approaches a police officer present at the scene just outside the house and asks about the commotion. Trevor asks, "Did he kill her?" But the cop obviously doesn't respond. Overhearing this, Box approaches Trevor to inquire about what he witnessed. Trevor states that the man who was with Andrea was a Muslim. The detective then orders that Trevor be brought along with them to the precinct for more interrogation. Back at home, Naz's brother Hassan notices Naz is missing in his room and alerts his father, Salim, of the situation. They try to call Naz, but he doesn't answer. Safar, their mother, hears the noise and gets out of bed too. When they call Amir, a friend of Naz's, he informs them that despite their prior plans to go to the party together, he had to cancel at the last minute. On the other hand, the desk sergeant takes a while to acknowledge Naz. They intend to let him go since they know that it is too late to use a breathalyzer to confirm intoxication. So Officer Wiggins gently pats Naz down as per protocol, and she discovers a bloody knife in his jacket. Naz makes an attempt to flee out of fear. Unfortunately, Trevor enters the room at the same time and recognizes Naz. Following Trevor's identification of Naz as the man with Andrea, the police detain him. Eventually, Detective Box enters the room where Naz is being interrogated. Box tries to communicate with Naz and inquires about the specifics of what transpired. Naz describes what happens, but Box has a suspicion that Andrea may have done something to enrage Naz by refusing to participate or behaving in a certain way. This, he believes, may have contributed to how things turned out. However, Naz assures him that everything they did was consensual and that he didn't rape or kill Andrea. While Box doesn't totally think that Naz is the culprit, he also has a hard time accepting Naz's version of what happened. Box must nevertheless carry out his obligations. Therefore, Naz is required to take off his clothes, be searched, then fingerprinted and photographed as per the protocol. This is when they notice his scratched back and the cut on his left palm. Naz agrees when Box requests his permission to take mouth and penile swabs for the DNA evidence. But when Naz later requests a lawyer, the people who collected his fingerprints say they are powerless to intervene. After a little while, John Stone, a disheveled attorney, notices Naz as he is being held back in the holding cell. However, Stone just strolls away in the privacy of his own thoughts, but promptly returns inside. He makes the decision to assist Naz and tells the desk sergeant that he is Naz's attorney. Stone doesn't know why Naz has been detained yet, so he asks him a few questions before advising him not to speak to the police officers altogether. Higgins and Maldonado complete their reports and other documentation after working 5 hours of overtime. However, when they ask a detective if they can leave, he refuses. Meanwhile, Detective Box prints several images of men with an ancestry similar to Naz's. He presents those images to Trevor, but Trevor can easily tell Naz apart from them and recognize him. To get more information on the case, Stone approaches the desk sergeant. The sergeant informs him that Box is involved in the murder investigation. Upon hearing this, Stone exhibits a confused and skeptical expression. In the meantime, Naz summons the courage to notify his father over the phone that he is being falsely accused of murder. Salim runs to the door right away but discovers that his cab is missing. After the murder, Naz is shown happily reminiscing on his time spent with Andrea. When Stone visits Naz in jail, he orders him to quit attempting to explain anything or give the truth to anyone. He added that this was just a suggestion since, from a legal standpoint, the truth might not always appear to be true or realistic. Stone continues by saying that they are entitled to their own version of events in the same way that the prosecutors have developed theirs. Detective Box contacts Don Taylor, Andrea's stepfather, as he is the next of kin. Tragically, Andrea's body is revealed to be still in bed back home. Everything is exactly as it is while the investigation is still ongoing and evidence is still being meticulously gathered. Eventually, Andrea's body is bagged and taken away from the crime scene to be submitted for an autopsy. At last, Naz's asthma inhaler is displayed at the corner of the bed before being presented as the 39th piece of evidence. Later, Stone and Naz are just talking at the precinct. Throughout the entire series, Stone is frequently seen using a chopstick to pick at his inflamed eczema. As he does this again, Stone admits that Box is actually an excellent, competent, and diligent cop but is lenient and flexible with the laws. Shortly after, he tells Nas that he must leave soon for another court appearance. Stone urges Nas not to speak to anyone as he leaves. In a corridor at the coroner's office, Don Taylor, Andrea's stepfather, is shown waiting. Taylor is given a heartbreaking account of Andrea's tragic demise by the coroner. However, Taylor still doesn't allow himself to view her body. Prior to signing a document and walking away, he is shown to be in a trance-like state. Detective Box later appears in the same office. As previously disclosed, Stone is seen picking at his scaly, inflamed foot while taking the subway, disgusting those around him. At courthouse security, he empties out his coat pockets of assorted junk, yet he manages to trigger the metal detector there. As the Khans, Naz's family, arrive at the precinct, they are informed that they cannot visit Naz because he is no longer a juvenile. Despite the sergeant's blunt and dismissive demeanor, the Khans choose to wait at the precinct. Taylor and Box are just seen talking in a coffee shop. Taylor admits that he and Andrea had a turbulent relationship and thus had to live apart. He resides in Queens, whereas Evelyn, Andrea's mother, owned the home that is now a crime scene. Also, Taylor adds that Andrea had previously run into legal and law enforcement issues. When Box inquires, Taylor admits that he cannot affirm or deny with certainty that Andrea was engaged in prostitution. He claims this is because Andrea didn't have a job or go to school. However, he doesn't identify or remember Naz when it is mentioned. Detective Box arrives at the precinct and permits Naz's family to see Naz alone. In a private room, Naz admits to being with the girl but claims to have fallen asleep after that. He claims he awoke to find the girl fatally stabbed but has no recollection of what happened before that. Naz tells his parents that he has a lawyer in Urdu, but Box is shown listening to their conversation on the CCTV before interrupting them when the time is up. After their meeting with Naz, the Khans are welcomed by Stone. He informs them that their son has not yet been charged. Stone also advises them to leave because it is pointless for them to stay. Then he visits Naz and is furious to hear that Naz spoke to his parents. In addition to this, he informs Naz that Box recorded every word they said. Later, it is seen that Box is talking cordially with Naz. Box tries to belittle Stone by implying that Stone is only in it for the money, whereas he is seeking the truth. He also tries to persuade Naz to open up to him. Box continues by saying that even though the case is already closed, he still wants to hear the whole story from Naz. However, Naz tells him firmly but respectfully that Stone has told him not to speak to anyone. Box is aware that Naz requires an inhaler for his asthma and delivers it to him before leaving. Box returns Naz's clothes to him before transporting him in a police van. Box is seen getting into his car. Stone arrives home via the subway, and the Khans are seen quietly seated at the dinner table. On the other hand, an extensive prison facility is accessed by the police van. Before being escorted inside, Naz and the other inmates are instructed to empty their pockets and go through metal detectors. Other prisoners are screaming at a distance in the disorderly, crowded prison. The inmates are led to a holding cell before being assigned beds and other essentials. A young man in distress is seen crying and throwing up, which enrages another man. He beats the young man while Naz and the others do nothing but watch. Stone is talking with his teenage son, whom he shares with his ex-wife when he returns to his house. His ex-wife follows shortly to offer to drive him. She is surprised when Stone informs her of the murder case and inquires as to his abilities. However, she later expresses support and apologizes for her initial attitude. Before requesting Box, Helen Weiss, the district attorney, gets briefed on the matter in the courtroom. Meanwhile, a group of police arrives at the Khan's home with a court-issued search warrant. They search the entire house and seize Naz's personal possessions and the Khan's desktop computer as well. Weiss and Box are seen discussing the matter in the DA's office. Weiss tries to put Box on the spot about how they will lose the case, but he promises that they won't. Moments later, Stone is waiting for Naz with the Khans at the court. Naz enters a not guilty plea to first-degree murder and several other offenses. Hearing all of those accusations completely shocks everyone in the courtroom. Then, an assistant district attorney asks for remand, arguing that because Naz poses a flight risk, he should be detained. Stone counters that there are no eyewitnesses to the actual crime, which makes the evidence supporting Naz merely circumstantial. The judge denies bail, and Naz is ordered to be locked up once more. Finally, he is shown being driven to Rikers Island in an armored police van. At Rikers Island, a police officer instructs Naz to fill out a form where she inquires about his sexual orientation, drug use, suicidal thoughts, and gang affiliation. She then wishes him luck due to Naz's negative response to everything. Meanwhile, Box is seen preparing the arresting officers, Wiggins and Maldonado, for trial. The detectives and officers are concerned that the jurors will sympathize with Naz because they lack any horrifying or negative evidence or background information on him. Stone is chatting with an ADA in the men's restroom while subtly inquiring about the strength of their case. He is concerned by the ADA's response that the trial will be over swiftly. Stone stops by the Khan's house to talk about the charges and Naz's trial. He warns them that the trial could drag on and that Naz might be sentenced to life in jail. Stone adds that if the matter gets to trial, he will charge a flat fee of $75,000. Salim makes it clear that they cannot afford him. They react similarly when Stone reduces the price to $60,000. Stone also warns them about legal aid lawyers who are simply interested in the money while remaining silent about the fact that he is exactly like them. He then provides them with a sample retainer, which they must carefully read and sign after settling on a price of $55,000. While Naz is going through additional jailhouse procedures, he observes an inmate being led from his cell by a female guard. The King of Queens, or Freddie, as we learn later, is being taken somewhere, although it's unclear where. Apparently, Freddie and the female guard are simply leaving to have sex in a utility room. Then, she is seen counting some cash and expressing concern that it could be too risky to continue. Meanwhile, Naz and the other inmates are given the riot act by the officer before being put in their beds in a large open area. Later, Weiss is discussing the case with her boss, who orders her to take quick action since John Stone is the defense attorney. She dismisses Stone as nothing more than a precinct trawler, though. In their meeting, Stone recommends manslaughter in Naz's case to Weiss. Meanwhile, Salim's friends inquire about their shared cab. His friends are seen being perpetually concerned about losing money, as the cab is their primary source of income. At Rikers, a prisoner tells Naz to keep his head down and shut up when Naz is on the bunk next to him. Freddie can be seen silently observing them from the balcony in front of his cell. Meanwhile, Box is seen inspecting pictures of Naz as a little child, whereas Stone visits a doctor for his eczema. The doctor discovers that the eczema has worsened as a result of an allergic reaction to the fragrance that Stone had applied. He advises Stone to use Crisco and Saran wrap to wrap his feet. On the other hand, a sophisticated attorney, Allison Crowe, holds a press conference while defending a flight attendant in a claim of wrongful termination. In the meantime, the Khans pay another visit to Naz at Rikers. Naz tells his parents in detail what took place that night as they meet him. He assures his parents that he did not kill Andrea, and that everyone is just falsely suspecting him. Salim makes an effort to soothe and console his son. Just then, a media representative informs a group of reporters about Naz's case in a televised news conference. This press conference is being watched by everyone, including the female attorney mentioned earlier, the imprisoned inmates, and Pakistanis living in the United States. Just when Stone has a chance to respond, he declares that Naz is as American as baseball. Back in prison, Naz already faces a rough time, and other prisoners keep approaching him to harass him and inquire if he really did rape the girl. Just then, a male guard approaches Naz and hands him a pair of black sneakers that Freddie gifted him. After taking a shower while wearing those shoes, Naz is seen once more alone in his thoughts. On the other hand, Salim's friends try to retrieve their taxi, but the policeman advises them to simply get a lawyer as the state will sue them to keep the vehicle. Moreover, he also advises them to file a case against Naz and accuse him of grand theft auto in order to get the cab back. The policeman hands them a business card for John Stone as he says this. After hearing this, Salim is too stunned to respond. Meanwhile, Stone explores the crime scene and captures photographs of the gory bedroom. When he notices a cat outside, he assumes it belongs to Andrea and opens the door for it. The cat curls up at Stone's feet, and he proceeds to pour it some milk. The next day, Allison Crowe finds Chandra Kapoor, a young Indian attorney, and visits the Khan's home. She ensures that they haven't signed the retainer and proceeds to belittle Stone for being an inexperienced and incompetent lawyer. She offers to represent them for free, in contrast to Stone's $55,000 fee. Back at Rikers, the inmates are seen watching television when Freddie offers Naz a cell phone, which he declines. Meanwhile, Stone purchases clothing and socks for Naz from a street vendor before visiting him. Naz is on the telephone with his father, who tells him that they are switching attorneys. Naz is perplexed by their decision, considering he favors Stone. Afterwards, Stone visits Naz in prison and gives him the clothes he previously purchased. He continues to brief Naz on the case before being abruptly cut off by Naz's disclosure that they now have a new attorney, Allison Crowe. Stone is also puzzled, but he gives the impression that he is aware of his family's perspective. Still, he hands Naz his card before leaving, and Naz is taken back to his cell. The next day, Stone meets Kapoor at Crowe's office. He accuses them of robbing him of his client and taunts Kapoor for willingly agreeing to be a prop. Stone notices a pair of brand new shoes displayed on a storefront as he walks back home. He looks at them longingly because he won't be able to wear them due to his eczema. Just then, Stone passes Andrea's house and notices Andrea's cat curled up and purring at the candle shrine there. He feels awful for the cat and apologizes to it for not being able to care for it because he is allergic. Returning to Rikers, a male guard leads Naz to visit Freddy in his cell. Freddy, the king of Queens and gang leader, has a private cell with many privileges. Naz doesn't understand why he has been called over. With a friendly voice, Freddy speaks to Naz and talks about family and the neighborhood. He reveals to Naz that the other inmates despise him as a rapist. After that, Freddy asks Naz to close his eyes and touch some raw flesh as they talk. Freddy jokes that what Naz is touching is a heart, and he swiftly takes his hand away. Right away, Freddy adopts a grim expression and offers to protect Naz. Stone, on the other hand, is concerned about Andrea's cat and brings it to an animal shelter. The shelter representative informs him that the cat will be euthanized if it is not adopted in 10 days. After his meeting with Freddy, Naz is led back to his bed by the male guard. The inmate next to Naz's bed inquires as to why Freddy wanted him over. He responds that Freddy offered him protection, which he declined. Later at night, Naz gets up to use the restroom. As he returns, he is horrified by his flaming bed and notices the other convicts are staring at him and making threatening gestures. After a while, Naz stares in silence as the guards remove what's left of his burned-out bed. Naz gets a glare from the inmate next to his bed as he gathers his possessions and walks away. At the Khan's residence, Salim Safar and Hassan are continuously harassed by the media and other strangers. Salim notices a crowd of media gathering outside as he is about to leave home, which stops him as a result. The next day at Rikers, a prisoner requests to borrow Naz's credit card to make a purchase at the commissary. He swears to pay Naz back and thus allows him to use the card. Afterwards, Naz is told to toughen up more by Calvin, another prisoner, who urges him to resist following orders from everyone there. He also explains to Naz the concept of a correct prison gaze. Naz is not aware of this, and Calvin proceeds to teach him. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Stone is shown to be contemplative and reflective. He leaves the police station and attends Andrea's funeral. He tries to speak with 2 of Andrea's friends during the funeral, but Detective Box cuts him off. The girls give Stone a strange look as they walk away. Stone makes fun of Box by claiming that even Box is curious about what truly happened that evening. After this, Stone notices Taylor and another man arguing at the funeral. He takes his phone to record them on camera. Following the service, Stone visits a church. He is looking through some pictures on his phone when a picture of Andrea directs him to a particular street and a subtle sign Invictus House. Calvin walks Naz through the prison rules with the other inmates. He advises Naz to work out in the gym to get muscular and appear threatening, but he warns him to be careful about the weight bench he chooses. Calvin also warns Naz not to get too close to Freddy, who is staring at them from across the gym. In the meantime, Stone visits the Invictus House, which he takes pictures of from across the street. Suddenly, the Invictus supervisor and the assistant approach him and urge him to leave. They accuse him of violating their privacy, but Stone quickly fabricates a narrative about having a son who needs rehab and walks away. On the other hand, Hassan is bullied at his high school as a result of Naz's imprisonment. Following this incident, the vice principal requests that his parents withdraw him from the school. While they are concerned about his capacity to maintain his education, the vice principal does nothing except observe them, still persistent in their demands. Just then, the previous Invictus assistant follows Stone down the street and offers a $350 proposal to capture pictures of Andrea. Back at Rikers, Calvin is still teaching Naz about life in prison. He explains that anything may be a weapon there. For instance, he adds baby oil and boiling cup noodle water can be combined to make a substance that resembles napalm. The next day at court, Stone persuades the judge to free a prostitute, with whom he later sets up a date. He runs into Kapoor in the courthouse hallway and gives her a copy of Andrea's file. Andrea was reportedly in rehab 3 times in the last 2 years. He offers to sell the file to Kapoor for $500 and suggests she retrieve the same information through a subpoena. Naz is seen in the prison wearing an orange jumpsuit before leaving for court. Instead, a guard hands him blue coveralls, another gift from Freddy. Outside the court, Allison Crow, Detective Box, and the Khans are swarmed by the media. Crow formally introduces herself to Naz in a holding pen. They have a brief discussion about the case and the courtroom setting. She then gives him a comb discreetly so he can straighten his hair and seem presentable. With a sweet smile, she responds that it's a good thing they didn't give him the orange coveralls. At the trial, Stone enters the courtroom and takes a seat behind the DA. Crow makes the same argument Stone used earlier to try to get Naz released on bail after pleading not guilty to the grand jury's indictment. Yet she continues to belittle and insult Stone. Naz is returned to prison after the jury declines to grant bail. As she turns to Stone, the DA admits that Crow's remarks about him were inappropriate and disrespectful. Stone just shrugs. Outside, Salim unintentionally interrupts Allison's interview by muttering something. This enrages her, and she treats Salim rudely for bringing up the case of his own son. As Naz enters Rikers, someone secretly slashes his left arm. He gets into his bed and uses the sheets from his mattress as a bandage. Naz approaches the guard right away and requests to see Freddy. As soon as he reaches Freddy's cell, he questions the purpose of giving Freddy the blue costume. Freddy goes on to say that the judge's judgment may be swayed by the orange jumpsuit, which typically indicates a violent offender. During their conversation, Freddy asks which item on his wall he is most proud of. Naz notices and points to a high school diploma. Freddy explains how much he enjoyed school and how pleased he is with his real diploma. Freddy, like Naz, stands out among the other inmates, which makes the young man smile. Furthermore, Freddy makes fun of his group's lack of intelligence and then hands Naz a paperback copy of Jack London's Call of the Wild. He tells Naz that the book will help him survive his time in prison, to which Naz replies, "I've already read it." Meanwhile, Stone invites the prostitute he had asked on a date to his place during the evening and hooks up with her. She finishes up and goes to the bathroom, where she is repulsed to see the itch X cream. Back at Rikers, Naz and Calvin are quietly talking about how Calvin got into prison. Calvin reveals that he killed the wrong man in an effort to seek revenge for his niece's murder and shows a bloodied crime scene photo of the woman. Meanwhile, at the DA's office, the attorneys talk about a tabloid in the New York Post with the headline citing Revenge that reported on a murder in Brooklyn and urged the DA to take active steps on Naz's case. In the meantime, Stone is shown going to another doctor as usual for his bloodied feet. The doctor asks him to throw out his previous medications, writes a new prescription for corticosteroids and a UV lamp, and tells Stone to buy Clorox bleach for his eczema and bathe in it. Stone is stunned as well as dumbfounded at such a prescription, yet he complies. Next, we see Freddy boxing with a prisoner and knocking him out, while Naz calmly observes. In contrast, the DA and Crow negotiate over a plea for Naz and ultimately agree on manslaughter with a 15-year prison sentence. Meanwhile, Stone fills his prescriptions at a pharmacy. The pharmacist advises the doctor in jest about the detrimental effects of such a potent cream, while being startled because the doctor has prescribed him 20 mg of corticosteroids. Crow visits Naz and lets her know that instead of a life sentence for murder, she can try to negotiate a settlement with the district attorney for 15 years and manslaughter. Naz says he'll think about it, then asks her about Chandra. As he returns to the prison, a copy of The Other Side of Midnight lies on his bed. The book has a yellow post-it note on it that reads "Take the deal," given by Freddy again, who is glancing down at him from the balcony. Meanwhile, Crow gives the Khans a call to let them know about the plea deal she has recommended to Naz. At a pub, Stone is seen contemplating again when a man he knows sitting next to him says that he has heard there is a bargain in the case for Naz. Simultaneously, Naz and Calvin are seen discussing the deal at Rikers. The following day, Naz is brought to court, and Crow asks whether he's prepared. She realizes that Naz is hesitant to respond. So after she leaves, she sends Kapoor in to persuade Naz to accept the plea agreement. Naz questions her about her thoughts on the matter and what she would do in his position. She explains to him calmly that if he's actually the one who killed Andrea, he should accept the agreement, but if not, he shouldn't. After a little while, Stone approaches Naz as well and counsels him to accept the plea offer because he will be released in 12 years and is only 35 years old. A couple of minutes later, the judge shows up and requests that the DA walk Naz through the proceedings. When Weiss asks Naz if he killed Andrea after hearing his account, he denies it. Given that this does not advance the case, the judge, Allison, and Weiss become furious over the wasted day. Crow is enraged in the holding cell and curses Naz for acting foolishly and rejecting the plea agreement, but Naz advises her to simply stop. Crow nods in agreement and storms off furiously. She tells the Khans that her firm may continue working on the matter, but Kapoor would take over. And if that happens, the case would no longer be pro bono. She also mentions that the trial would be prolonged and that they were free to hire another attorney. Stone phones the animal shelter from the pub and learns that Andrea Cornish's cat is still there. Calvin stirs a hot mug while acting upset that Naz did not accept the deal. He then quickly drops some baby lotion into the mug and splashes Naz. While Naz manages to shield his face, his arms get burned. He visits the prison infirmary to get his burns bandaged, but when the guards ask him to identify the perpetrator, he simply declines. Naz asks the guard to see Freddy again, this time appealing for assistance and protection. While silently puffing on his cigarette, Freddy observes him. Before heading for a lecture at his child's classroom, Stone is seen putting a UV light on his foot. He gives the students a briefing on his work as a defense attorney, yet the students don't appear to be impressed. John and his son are having a conversation after the lecture when the kid confesses that Stone has embarrassed him. Freddy leads Naz to his new private cell on the upper floor to ensure his safety at Rikers. John is seen arriving at his flat, while Kapoor is seen waiting. In order to assist Naz, she seeks out Stone. He offers a $50,000 charge, but after more negotiation, they settle on a cost of $30,000. It is evident that the DA and her team are formulating a defense strategy. Kapoor learns that ketamine was discovered in Naz's pockets in the meantime. When Stone is asked what kind of substance it is, he explains that, while it is an aphrodisiac, it has a tendency to knock people out later on. Afterwards, Detective Box tells the DA that, after 33 years, he is retiring. She does, however, urge him to retrace Naz's movements from that evening before he leaves, and he complies. Salim's friends plead with him to accuse Naz of grand theft in a cafe so they may get their cab back. But Salim defiantly resists. Naz is escorted from Rikers' prison cell and brought to the showers. A man is seen on the floor with Freddy. It is revealed that Calvin was punished by Freddy and his friend for what he did to Naz. Calvin is lying there, bloodied and naked, on the ground. Freddy requests that he bash Calvin up as payback while he stands there silently. Naz approaches Calvin and kicks him in the stomach. He appears to be through with the beatings, but Calvin accuses him of being incompetent and frail. Furious, Naz returns and kicks him several times and smacks him in the head before being dragged off. Stone retrieves Andrea's cat from the animal shelter and brings it back to his house while wearing protective rubber gloves. Box is shown retracing Naz's steps from the night of the murder in the meantime. He meticulously notes the timing, examines the data on every cell, and eventually discovers surveillance footage showing Naz going through Manhattan. Following these actions, he then illustrates the route on a street map. Stone brings the cat home and gives it some canned food. Due to his allergies, he feeds the cat and then locks it in a bedroom. Meanwhile, Freddy visits Naz in his cell, and they discuss what unfolded in the showers. He even says that he likes Naz for having secrets and wrath. Back at home, Stone claims that the medication is messing him up while he and the former prostitute lie in bed. She declines his offer to let her adopt the cat. The Dr. Stone sees the following day acknowledges that steroids do have a tendency to lower libido. He can, however, freely select between erections and eczema. The station receives Trevor to be questioned by the DA about the murderous night, but the DA dismisses Trevor from the list of potential witnesses since he is argumentative. Naz shaves his hair, smokes, and watches TV with Freddy and his crew back at the prison. Later footage shows Freddy and Naz playing chess. Stone inquires for Viagra at the pharmacy, but the pharmacist states that they won't have any until Wednesday. Box locates additional security cameras in the city and retrieves the footage. The DA is shown the video, where Andrea arrives after the two guys exit the taxi. They think this demonstrates Naz's deliberate attempt to woo just one female. Stone visits a restaurant and orders ketamine from the waiter. The waiter presents himself as oblivious to what he is discussing. Stone claims that he is aware Andrea had called him. The waiter ultimately acknowledges, after some probing, that he provided Andrea with the drugs, but she still owed him money. Stone explains that the waiter will be required to testify in court. Stone, Kapoor, and an investigator visit Andrea's home the following day. The aforementioned investigator wanders around and takes more pictures of the crime scene. Stone acknowledges having the cat when the man asks about it. He is seen inspecting the yard before moving on to the back gate, which doesn't close completely. Also, Stone offers the cat to Kapoor, who declines it. Stone responds that there is a flat rate when she inquires about the investigator's fee. Finally, the investigator comes across some blood in the backyard. The DA inquires about the possibility that Naz's hand wound might have resulted from his hand slipping on a knife while stabbing as opposed to being cut on the shattered glass. The coroner confirms that it was a stab wound. Naz feels confident and fearless, knowing that Freddy has his back. The other prisoners get upset when he switches the TV station in the common area. When they learn he is with Freddy, they hesitate and hold back. Later, Naz is assigned to stenciling walls when he's summoned to Freddy's cell. When he arrives, Freddy reveals that Petey, another prisoner, will be receiving some 8 balls from his woman, which Naz must smuggle into the facility. Naz initially hesitates, but ultimately decides to do it. Stone grabs a couple of cat toys, places them in the room, and hastily shuts the door. He listens to the cat play from behind the closed door. Stone then grooms himself, combs his hair, and swallows a blue pill that he got from a stranger in a dubious restroom. Afterwards, he goes to his preferred hooker's bar and claims that he is ready to go. However, she responds that they should make plans to meet at a different time as she's working. Another customer who appears to be affluent interrupts Stone as he is trying to persuade her further. Stone discreetly moves back as the woman locks her gaze on the same man. The following day, the toxicology findings were found to contain MDMA and ketamine in both, and amphetamine in Naz. The reports reach Kapoor as well, and Stone acknowledges that they don't truly know Naz. Meanwhile, Naz is seen practicing swallowing grapes as he tries to smuggle the drugs. The next day, Stone visits Naz at Rikers and confronts him about the toxicology results. He gets defensive and denies using narcotics. Stone believes it was Adderall, though. He claims that the fact that using Adderall without a prescription is illegal and can be problematic for the case. While discussing the same subject with Stone and Kapoor, Naz frequently casts a glance at Petey's way. Petey hands Naz 4 speedballs as he turns to leave the visiting room. All 4 of them are discreetly swallowed by Naz behind his hand. Stone observes it even though he does it secretly, and he warns Naz that if he is caught, the case would be over. Naz then recalls the murderous evening and says that there were actually 2 men outside Andrea's home, not just one. Naz exits from the visitor's room and heads to Freddy's cell. To get the pills out, he has to poop in front of the other people in a tub. Naz swallows laxatives to force the 4th one out after the other 3 come out with ease. Kapoor and Stone are watching Trevor Williams' interview back at Stone's place. When he claims to be alone with the police, they discover that he is lying. Stone pursues Trevor that evening and confronts him when he's by himself. He is then persuaded by Stone to admit that Dwayne Reed was the other man. Stone calls Kapoor immediately to confirm if the well-known gangster Dwayne Reed has an active arrest warrant. He walks into a grocery store and asks to see Reed eventually. He is led to the back. He sees 3 men playing cards in the back room as he cautiously makes his way there. He introduces himself as Trevor's attorney, but as he cites 87th Street, Reed flees the scene. Stone chases after the man and grabs an iron rod after a brief chase. He finds himself in a pitch-black, abandoned building. Stone removes the litter box's contents while wearing a mask, then puts it back in the room. Naz receives a cell phone from Freddy so he can call his family. He then begins to smoke weed. Naz calmly observes as usual. Safar attends a new job interview after losing her previous one, owing to the notoriety caused by the case of her kid. The police and detectives are continuously seeking information regarding Naz in the meantime. They look up his Facebook page and notice that someone by the name of Amir posted some positive comments about Naz. A teacher from Naz's high school is interrogated by the DA. He admits that Naz had some issues and was indeed problematic. For the time being, Stone goes to Chinatown to see a Chinese doctor for his eczema. The doctor charges him $300 and assures him that the treatment is effective as he measures out some powders. Freddy and his team watch Naz get the word sin tattooed on his knuckles. Naz says that when another prisoner requested to use his cell, he refused. Freddy claims he handed Naz the phone so that he could profit from it while he was incarcerated. When Kapoor reviews the gas station video, she notices the hearse driver. She takes a screenshot of the license plate and trails it. She locates the vehicle and its driver. When she cites the footage, the driver claims Andrea gave off unpleasant vibrations. Kapoor, perplexed, asks him to clarify what he meant. He merely advises her to read Judges 16 in the Bible. At his home, Stone is seen preparing the Chinese concoction with water and drinking it. When Kapoor gets there with a Bible, she begins to read the verse that the driver had mentioned earlier. She confesses to Stone that the Undertaker is creepy and intimidating. Fox reports that Naz commuted for 40 minutes to attend high school. He is curious as to why, so he goes to his high school to learn more. Box discovers that Naz was expelled from grade 9 for fighting during a conversation with a basketball coach. Later that night, Stone and Kapoor proceed to drink in a pub. He talks about life after 9/11 as she tells him she broke up with her boyfriend. Stone relates the high school event to Box when they briefly meet. Kapoor is then shown the report by Stone, and she confronts Naz about it while they are together. Naz continues by saying that he was bullied following 9/11 and snapped under the pressure. Kapoor claims to understand the reasoning. When Kapoor returns home, she is seen scribbling her opening remarks when Stone calls her to keep it brief. On the day of his trial, Naz gets a white shirt and a tie from Freddy, but returns them. Stone dresses up and puts on his new shoes because his feet have improved. He is delighted to show Kapoor his shoes in court, but she ignores him as she's still working on her speech. After a while, Naz walks in wearing a blue shirt, and Stone cautions him that he should be wearing white. He hastily swaps out his beige shirt for the blue one, explaining that any other color may influence the judge's decision. Finally, Weiss makes her opening statements first, followed by Kapoor's brief response that the state has the burden of proof. Weiss analyzes the video of Naz in the cab at the toll booth after the court appearance. She then shows two men getting out of the cab. Then there's Naz, who buys beer and discovers only Andrea's DNA on a beer bottle. She discovers Naz's blood on a parking ticket later on. When the court session ends, Naz is escorted back to the prison. Freddie and Naz can be seen chatting in Freddie's cell. He tells Naz that he is at Rikers to be closer to his family. He admits to putting up with another murder charge in order to do so. Freddie wonders if Naz enjoys his life outside. He momentarily considers the question and feels depressed, so he smokes crack with Freddie. The following trial day, Weiss observes Officer Wiggins' traffic stop of Naz. Wiggins describes how she procured the knife, and a video of Naz trying to flee the precinct is shown in court. Naz gets more tattoos and smokes more crack at Rikers as time passes. Freddie dismisses Kapoor's confidence in him. Then, Naz notices another of Freddie's crew receiving a blowjob from Petey. At knife point in the showers, the prisoner who was getting the blowjob warns Naz not to tell Freddie. He swears he won't. Later that night, he gets high and starts thinking about Chandra. He then calls her on his cell phone just to say goodnight. Stone goes through the images of Andrea's house, wondering how she could afford to live in a $10 million property. He asks Chandra the same question before running a title search on his laptop. He notices that the house is in probate to Evelyn Cornish, Andrea's mother. He eventually learns about Evelyn's financial advisor, Raymond Halley, after doing thorough research. At the funeral, Stone recalls Raymond Halley, or Ray, bickering with Andrea's stepfather, Taylor. He then pays him a visit. Halley initially refuses to engage in the discussion, but eventually decides to speak off the record. He alleges that Taylor is a deadbeat personal trainer who is owed half of Evelyn's estate. Andrea, on the other hand, would not give him his share, and he was powerless to persuade her. Taylor, as a result, succeeds in inheriting all of the property after her death. Stone intends to pay him a visit as well, so he stops by a fitness club. He stands there, watching Taylor give special attention to another woman. Next, Box is brought to a new crime scene. As he arrives, he sees a young woman with bloody wounds found dead in the street who resembles Andrea Cornish. The DA presents images of Andrea Cornish's murder scene on the day of the trial. Weiss shows the knife, and coroner Dr. Chester states Naz's hand wound was caused by his hand slipping onto the blade of the knife. Safar exits the courtroom upon hearing this. Kapoor introduces the 22 wounds and questions each one. She even brings up an older controversial testimony of Dr. Chester, making him look bad. After the court is adjourned for the day, Taylor goes out for a smoke, and Stone follows him. Meanwhile, Kapoor warns Safar that her exit looks bad for the case. Safar admits to Kapoor that she has lost faith in her son. On the other hand, as Salim goes past some anti-Muslim graffiti, a woman in a hijab despises him. The next day, Salim and his friends plot how to re-enter the taxi business. Salim's friends want him to sell his part, but they underbid him by $75,000, much to his dismay. They complete a transaction at a bank, and he receives his check. He walks out, calling them thieves as he does. On the same trial day, the court goes over the scratches on Naz's back. Stone, on the other hand, follows Taylor and attempts to learn more about him. As Taylor works on the other side of the gym, he questions another fitness trainer about him. He then meets with the accountant and learns about Taylor's maxed-out credit cards and his 2 bankruptcy filings. Stone sees another of Taylor's ex-wives the next day, a cougar who divorced him after some physical assault. Weiss interrogates Naz's classmate, who purchased Adderall for $10 for 10 milligrams. Naz had a prescription and was reselling the pills to his high school classmates. Naz notices Petey and another crew member, Victor, leaving together. He sees Petey's mother at the visitation and assures her that he is fine before taking the speedballs in his hands, looking disheartened. The basketball coach is called to the stand at the courthouse. He discusses the grade 9 incident. Kapoor, on the other hand, points out how poorly Muslim students were treated following 9/11s. The coach surprises the court by stating that, while Kapoor's statement was correct, it was only Naz who sent 2 others to the hospital. Naz had apparently thrown a full Coke can at another kid. After learning this, Kapoor maintains her silence, while Weiss states that the state is at rest. Taylor confronts Stone at the barbells and threatens him while at the gym. Naz calls his mother, but she does not respond on purpose. So, he simply goes to watch television with Freddie. Next, we see Box on the stand for Kapoor. She is perplexed as to why Naz has not confessed, but the detective is confident in the evidence. Kapoor extracts the narcotics, ketamine and ecstasy previously sold to Andrea by the waiter. She pays a visit to Naz, and the two meet in a holding cell. He is astonished as to why she is working for him, as only his father believes in him. She affirms that she believes in him as well. They eventually have a moment and kiss. However, Chandra pulls back and leaves the holding cell. Dr. Katz, the defense expert witness, reports to the court that one of 4 knives has gone missing. Andrea and Naz were supposedly playing Mumblety-Peg knife game, which is explained further. He goes on to state that for many years the front gate has been rusty and ajar. The back gate is likewise open, and a window on the second level is accessible from a tree. Also, anyone stepping up the steps from the front door blocks the view of the kitchen. Upon hearing this, Weiss attempts to discredit Katz as a celebrity pathologist seeking fame. She brings up a quote from when he praised Dr. Chester, which he dismisses as a polite dinner comment. She persuades him that the 4th knife could have gone missing at any time, but Katz insists on the wounds. Stone learns about the asthma inhaler, which is labeled 39. He subpoenas Box on his last day of work, and Kapoor puts him on the stand. They talk about Trevor Williams, Duane Reade, the strange driver, and the asthma inhaler that Box gave to Naz. She describes his behaviors as unprofessional and unethical and claims that he may have sought to hide them unconsciously. Back in prison, Naz rushes to the washroom when he notices Petey has slit his wrists and is dead. Freddie is baffled as to why Petey would do such a thing. He's concerned since this has hindered their drug distribution, and Naz speaks out about what he knows. Then, Freddie murders Victor, the BJ receiver, in the morning while Naz distracts the guard. Box analyzes the Andrea Cornish video and observes how nervous she appears to be about being followed. In court, Kapoor questions Trevor Williams, who acknowledges being with Duane Reade on the street outside Andrea's house. Kapoor then confronts Reade, who has committed 7 house burglaries with a knife and has a history of other violent crimes. Following Reade, Kapoor confronts the creepy driver, the Undertaker, who also has a history of knife violence. Yet, it is unclear where he went after leaving the gas station. Weiss has no objections to these topics. Stone notes this and tells Kapoor that Weiss is worried but is trying not to show it to the jury. In retaliation for their fitness club altercation, Stone issues Taylor a subpoena in an alleyway and angrily threatens him with an ex-client from New Jersey. At the courthouse, Taylor is questioned by Kapoor, who brings up his reason for killing Andrea the inheritance of the $10 million property. Taylor denies murdering Andrea and seems unconcerned about his gold digging. In fact, he even applied for the estate before Andrea's funeral. Box discovers additional footage of Andrea leaving a restaurant and arguing with a man on the sidewalk. He makes the manager hand over the credit card receipts from that night. Just then, Box runs into an old acquaintance who owns a private security agency and asks him to obtain information from credit card receipts. On the other hand, Kapoor tells Stone she wants to summon Naz to the stand. Stone says it's a mistake because they've already established reasonable doubt and Naz might erase everything. In the holding cell, Kapoor asks Naz if he will do it, and he accepts but begs for a favor first. Kapoor agrees and purchases condoms at a drug shop before visiting a street drug dealer. Naz is escorted to the courthouse, still suffering from withdrawal symptoms. In the holding cell once more, Kapoor sneakily passes him a pill and the parcel from her vagina. On the stand, Naz is dressed in a white shirt, and Kapoor guides him through the night. Naz maintains his innocence while remaining calm and contrite. Helen Weiss continues the attack, interrogating Naz about his Adderall sales, the stolen cab, the details of his intercourse with Andrea, why he didn't contact 911, and why he took the knife. Naz is uncomfortable and unsure of himself. Kapoor then declares that the defense is finished. Stone is gloomy and tells Kapoor that they have no chance of winning. Later that evening, Stone comes back home, takes the cat, and returns it to the animal shelter, as it was making his allergies worse. On Friday, the court instructs the jury to spend the weekend without using electronic devices so as to not influence their decision through the media. Box examines a list of phone numbers and phone calls. He emphasizes a sequence of phone calls from Raymond Halley. Next, he presents himself to Halliel in the bar and recalls being shot in a strip club. As they're talking, he abruptly mentions Andrea Cornish and presents a screenshot of Ray and Andrea arguing. He assumes the two were involved in a relationship, and he made illicit withdrawals from her trust fund and questions Halley. However, he refuses to answer further and simply walks away. Box submits his findings to Weiss, presenting a $300,000 withdrawal from Andrea's account, followed by a series of video pictures depicting Halley's travels on the night of the murder. Strangely, Weiss dismisses the new evidence. Meanwhile, the guard at Rikers delivers Freddie a DVD of Kapoor kissing Naz in the detention cell. Stone receives a parcel and watches the same video. Kapoor is practicing her closing argument while Stone visits Naz. He tells him that this could be grounds for a mistrial and that Kapoor's career as a lawyer is likely over. Naz agrees to let Stone present the DVD before the court. With Weiss, Stone, and Kapoor, the judge views the tape. He directs Stone to take over the case, who resists and is unsuccessful in obtaining a mistrial. The judge informs Kapoor that the CD will be handed over to the Legal Ethics Committee. Stone runs into Box at a Chinese restaurant and tells him the video didn't function. Box denies it, but Stone feels Box has another lead in the case. After the trial, Chandra Kapoor meets Alison Crowe and is fired. Furthermore, Weiss concludes by emphasizing Naz's blackout during the crime as a convenient excuse. Box enters the courtroom but abruptly exits when she claims that Naz is the lone suspect. She takes up the knife and points out the 22 stab wounds before pausing, as if in contemplation. Stone's eczema flares up in the evening as he struggles with his draft argument. He tries every remedy he knows but finally goes to the hospital. There, they discard his herbal treatment and speculate that it is due to stress. Back in court, Stone, wearing white gloves, declares to the jury that Naz has the constitutional right to be presumed innocent beyond a reasonable doubt. He admits Naz stole a car, took illicit narcotics, fled rather than reporting, made an unlawful left turn, and resisted arrest. The murder evidence, however, is circumstantial, and the authorities did not attempt to investigate anyone else. Everyone then awaits the verdict of the jury. Naz is taken back to Rikers Island. At this point, Freddie finally explains to Naz why he shielded him. He saw Naz's innocence and took care of him so he wouldn't be a completely cold individual. As Naz hears this, he remains silent and quietly takes a hit of crack. The next day, the foreperson of the jury reveals that the jury is hung 6-6, which displeases the judge. Weiss also declines to prosecute a retrial, even when one is granted. And Stone informs Naz that he is now free. He packs his belongings into a bag and begins his exit procedure. While Freddie is pounding the heavy bag in the gym, the guard hands over a paperback copy of Call of the Wild to Naz. Just then, moments later, Salim arrives to pick up his son, and they embrace on the pavement. Box is employed by campus security when Weiss approaches him and requests his help in tracking Ray Halley. Naz is having an uncomfortable dinner with his family at home due to the disappointment that his mother didn't support him. He then goes out by himself and meets Stone at a cafe. Stone argues that life goes on and encourages Naz to put it behind him and ignore how others perceive him. When his old school pal Amir walks in, Naz scares him away with a prison stare. When Stone takes the metro home, his advertisement "No fee till you're free" is shown above the door. Naz returns to the same riverside as the night he met Andrea and vividly remembers sharing the experience with her. Finally, Stone goes to retrieve the cat as an animal cruelty commercial plays.